This fucking guy, thought Joshua, looking at Yeshua ben Yosef. Over there, standing on that small footstool, mad as a hatter, shouting about his dad or something, smiting us all. Another lunatic. Joshua was at the market with his dad. Another day, another shekel. He was busy selling wine. He and his dad ran a famous wine business here in Jerusalem. At least we have that going for us. There is nothing that could change. People will always want wine, and we are the best in town. The air was thick with the smell of dust and goat. A fly buzzed near Joshua's ear, and he swatted it away. The sun beat down on the canvas awning of their stall, the heat of physical weight. His father, Avi, sat on a stool in the shade, his face a row map of wrinkles, watching the crowd with the patient eyes of a man who has seen it all. Joshua poured a measure of their best Galilee red for a Roman legionary, the dark liquid catching the light. The soldier grunted, paid, and moved on. Business was steady. It was always steady. Across the market, Yeshua was still at it. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. He was talking about vineyards and masters and workers who came late, but got paid the same. Joshua snorted. The man knew nothing about running a business. Pay the layabouts the same as the men who sweated all day, you'd be bankrupt in a week. Still, a small crowd had gathered. Mostly women and a few fellas who looked like they'd lost their last coin on a donkey race. The desperate and the bored. He's drawing a crowd, that one, Avi said, not taking his eyes off of the man. They're not buying anything, da, Joshua said. He wiped the counter with a damp cloth. They're listening to stories. It's cheaper than wine. He wanted another hour of sleep and a piece of his mother's honey cake, not this heat and the rambling of a carpenter's son from Nazareth. His own head was thick from the dregs he and his cousins had finished the night before. He'd woken up with a taste of stale wine in his mouth and a dull ache behind his eyes, a feeling so familiar it was almost a friend. He looked at the stall, the clay amphorae lined up in neat rows. The business his grandfather had started with a single goat skin of sour wine. They built it into this, the best in the city. No carpenter's son was going to change that. Then a runner pushed through the market, a young boy from the Kana district, his face flushed with panic. He skidded to a halt in front of Yeshua, babbling about a wedding, a disaster, a terrible shame for the family. The wine had run out. Joshua felt a flicker of professional interest. A wedding running out of wine was a catastrophe, but a boon for any merchant who could get there fast with a cart. He looked at Avi, who was already doing the calculations in his head. They could charge double, triple even. But Yeshua just placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and calmed him. He said something Joshua couldn't hear. The boy's face went from panic to confusion. Yeshua then turned to his own followers, a scruffy bunch of fishermen and tax collectors, and they all started walking away, heading in the direction of Kana. The small crowd dispersed, and the market returned to its normal hum. Well, that's that, Joshua said, disappointed. An opportunity missed. Maybe, Avi said, a strange look on his face. Or maybe something else is happening. Joshua didn't know what he meant. He just felt the sun on his back and the familiar weight of a long day's work ahead. It was 2 days later when the rumours started. They trickled in at first, carried by merchants and travellers coming from the north. Whispers of a miracle at the wedding in Kana. Joshua ignored them. Miracles were for children's stories. Business was for men. But the whispers grew louder, more detailed. They said the host had filled 6 stone jars with water. They said Yeshua had told him to do it. And they said that when the servants drew from those jars, it wasn't water they poured. It was wine. Water into wine, Joshua said to his father, laughing. It's a good trick. He must have had a few skins hidden away. Palm the switch. They say it was the best wine anyone had ever tasted, Avi said. He was polishing a clay cup, his movements slow and deliberate. Better than ours. The laughter died in Joshua's throat. That's just talk. People get excited. It was a wedding. They were already drunk. But the story spread through Jerusalem like a fever. It was all anyone talked about. People who had been at the wedding swore to it. They described the wine with a reverence that made Joshua's stomach clench. A deep, complex red with notes of fig and a finish as smooth as a lover's touch. It was a poet's description, not a drinker's. It was also a perfect description of their own prize vintage, the one they sold for a fortune to priests and Roman officials. The first real sign of trouble came a week later. The temple steward, a man who brought a dozen amphorae every month without fail, came to the stall. He looked embarrassed. "I only need 6 this month, Avi," he said, avoiding their eyes. "6?" Avi asked, his voice calm. "Is the high priest unwell?" No, nothing like that. It's just, a new supplier has made a generous donation. We must show our gratitude." Joshua knew. He didn't have to ask. "This new supplier," he said, his voice tight. "Does he have a name?" "They call him Yeshua," the steward mumbled, and then paid for his 6 jars and hurried away. Joshua felt a cold fury. This wasn't a trick anymore. This was business. Yeshua was undercutting them, giving the product away for free to their best clients. It was predatory. It was unnatural. He spent the afternoon in a black mood, snapping at customers and kicking at a stray dog that came too close. He decided to fight back. He dropped the price of their second-best wine, the one most people drank day to day. He put up a sign painted in bold letters, "A price you can believe in." It worked for a while. The store was busier. They sold more volume, but the profit on each sale was thinner than a beggar's blanket. Avi hated it. "We are selling on price, not on quality," he said one evening, as they counted the meager pile of coins. "It is the first step to ruin." "What else are we supposed to do?" Joshua shot back. "How do we compete with a man who has no overheads? He doesn't have to grow grapes, press them, ferment them, or store them. His supply chain is a bloody miracle." The problem got worse. Yeshua wasn't just a one-time wonder. He seemed to have a knack for showing up wherever there was a crowd and a shortage of drink. A gathering on a hillside, a feast for 5,000 people. Stories came back of endless wine appearing from nowhere. He wasn't even using jars anymore, just breaking bread and passing a cup that never seemed to run dry. It was an innovation in distribution that Joshua could only dream of. Their own business began to wither. Old customers would walk past the stall, giving a sad, apologetic shrug. The rows of amphorae stayed full. The dust settled on their shoulders. Joshua's days were long and quiet. He had too much time to think. He watched his father, who seemed to shrink with every passing day, the worry carving new lines into his face. The business, their legacy, was bleeding out, and the man holding the knife was a wandering preacher who spoke in riddles. The lowest point came with the tax bill. The notice arrived on the back of a Roman donkey, a crisp piece of papyrus, demanding a sum they no longer had. Joshua held the notice in his hand, the black ink swimming before his eyes. They would lose the stall. They would lose their house. They would lose everything. That night he sat alone among the unsold wine, drank until his head was numb, and cursed the name of Yeshua of Nazareth. Then, during the festival week, everything changed. The city was packed, but the mood was tense. There were rumors Yeshua had ridden into town on a donkey like some kind of king. The priests were furious. The Romans were nervous. Joshua didn't care about politics. He just knew the tension was bad for business. Nervous people didn't linger in the market. On Friday morning, the market was in chaos. A column of Roman soldiers marched through, shoving stalls aside. People were shouting. Joshua heard snippets of conversation. A trial in the night. The governor. A sentence. "What's all this about?" he asked the legionary from the other day, who was standing guard nearby. "The preacher," the Roman grunted, looking bored. "Yeshua, causing a public nuisance. They're taking him up the hill. Be over by sundown. Messy business." Joshua looked past the soldier. He saw a small procession being herded through the crowd. In the middle was Yeshua, looking tired and beaten. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second across the market square. There was no anger in the man's face, just a sort of weary resignation. Then he was gone, swept along by the crowd. "Right," Joshua said, turning back to his stall. A strange feeling settled over him. It wasn't pity or fear or even relief. It was the clear, sharp awareness of a business opportunity. "All this shouting," he said to his father, who had come to the front of the stall. "It makes a man thirsty." Avi looked at his son, then at the chaotic square, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Pour me a cup, son." For the first time in months, the stall was busy. People gathered in clumps, gossiping, arguing, their nerves frayed, and they were all drinking. Joshua and Avi worked without a break, their hands aglow as they filled cup after cup. The coins piled up. Late in the afternoon, the sky went dark. A strange, unnatural gloom fell over the city. A tremor ran through the ground, rattling the jars on the shelves. The crowd in the market panicked. "The gods are angry!" a woman shrieked. Joshua seized the moment. He hopped onto a stool. "Nerves frayed? The world ending?" he bellowed. "Nothing settles the soul like a cup of O'Malley's. Avi's best red. A nerve settler for an unsettling day." They sold out of 3 whole amphorae in the next hour. By the time the sun returned, pale and weak, the city was quiet. The crowds were gone, and Joshua's money bag was heavier than it had been in a year. The next few days were a blur of rumor. The preacher was dead. His followers were hiding. There was a mad story about him coming back to life. Joshua dismissed it. A good marketing gimmick, but not believable. A week later, the temple steward returned. He walked up to the stall and cleared his throat. "I'll be needing my usual dozen this month, Avi," he said. "Oh?" Joshua asked, raising an eyebrow. "What about your other supplier, the one with the generous donations?" The steward looked flustered. Yes. Well, it seems he ceased trading. Permanently." Business boomed. With their main competitor abruptly and permanently removed from the market, they were the only game in town again. They put their prices back up. They bought 2 new fields of vines near Bethlehem. They were not just starving, they were thriving. The only annoyance was Yeshua's followers who kept meeting in secret. They didn't cause any trouble, but Joshua heard they didn't drink wine anymore, just ate bread and talked. Fanatics. It was a shame to lose the customers, but it was a small price to pay. One evening, months later, Joshua and Avi sat counting a mountain of coins by lamplight. "Strange times, son," Avi said, shaking his head. "All that fuss. For a moment there I thought we were finished." Joshua laughed, scooping a handful of silver into a bag. He was just a lunatic, Da. A flash in the pan. They're all the same, these zealots. They make a lot of noise and then they disappear. He gestured around the storeroom, at the amphorae stacked to the ceiling. "You watch. Our business, our name, this is what lasts. In 100 years, people will still be coming here for a good cup of wine. His name? Give it a year. No one will even remember it."